John and David were both patients in a mental hospital. One day, while they were walking, they passed the hospital swimming pool, and John suddenly dove into the deep end. He sank to the bottom and stayed there. David promptly jumped in and saved him, swimming to the bottom of the pool and pulling John out. The medical director came to know of David's heroic act. He immediately ordered that David be discharged from the hospital, as he now considered him to be okay. The doctor said, "David, we have good news and bad news for you. The good news is that we are going to discharge you because you have regained your sanity. Since you were able to jump in and save another patient, you must be mentally stable. The bad news is that the patient that you saved hung himself in the bathroom and died after all." David replied, "Doctor, John didn't hang himself. I hung him there to dry." An elderly woman was very ill and in the hospital. Her daughter was constantly by her bedside, but when she had to go to work, she called her husband and made him promise he would visit his mother-in-law while she was away. When she came home after work, she asked her husband, very worried, "So, how is my mom doing?" "She's great," he replied. "She will be released from the hospital any day now and will move in with us when she's released and go on to live for many, many years." "Wow, that's amazing," says the wife, "but also very strange. Before I left the hospital, she seemed very ill, and the doctor said she may only have a few days left. Did she have some kind of a miraculous recovery?" "Well, I don't know about that," replied the husband, "but today the doctor told me that we needed to start preparing for the worst." A professor, a CEO, and a janitor are in a forest when they discover a magic fairy. The fairy says, "I will give you what you most desire if you do someone else's job for a day." The professor says, "I'll be an elementary school teacher. What can be so hard about teaching a bunch of 6-year-olds how to read?" So he is teleported into a classroom. After a few minutes, all the kids screaming gets on his nerves, so he throws all his supplies and gives up. The CEO says, "I'll be a waiter. All you do is carry food back and forth. This'll be a breeze." So he's teleported to a restaurant. After about an hour, all the annoying customers drive him insane, so he smashes his plates on the ground and gives up. The janitor says, "I'll be an artist." So he is transported to an art facility. He glues all the classroom supplies and shattered plates to a canvas, then sells it for $1 billion. And the fairy asked the janitor how he was so clever. The janitor says, "I got a master's degree in art." A university student wanted to sit next to one of his teachers at lunch. However, the teacher looked at the student with an arrogant face and said, "A swan shan't be friends with a pig." "Then I shall fly on," answered the student with a smile. The teacher was clearly vexed by the cheeky reply and decided to do everything in his power to fail the student at the exams. At the oral exam, he gave the student the hardest questions, but the student had amazing answers for everything. Therefore, hoping he could still fail his victim, the teacher asked him a trickier question. "You are walking on a road and you find 2 bags. One contains gold, the other cleverness. Which bag do you choose?" "The gold." "Unfortunately, I don't agree. I'd choose cleverness because that's more important than money." "Everyone would choose what they don't have," says the student. The teacher turns red and he's so angry he writes "ass" on the student's paper. The student leaves without looking at the paper. However, he returns shortly, gives back his paper and says, "Excuse me, sir, you did sign my paper, but you forgot to give my grade." A young man graduated from the University of Arkansas with a degree in journalism. His first assignment for the newspaper that hired him was to write a human interest story. Being from Arkansas, he went back to the country to do his research. He went to an old farmer's house way back in the hills, introduced himself to the farmer, and proceeded to explain to him why he was there. The young man asked, "Has anything ever happened around here that made you happy?" The farmer thought for a minute and said, "Yeah, one time one of my neighbor's sheep got lost. We formed a posse and found it. We all screwed it up and took it back home." "I can't print that," the young man exclaimed. "Can you think of anything else that happened that made you or a lot of other people happy?" After another moment, the farmer said, "Yeah, one time my neighbor's daughter, a good-looking girl, got lost. We formed a big posse that time and found her. After we all screwed her, we took her back home." Again, the young man said, "I can't print that either. Has anything happened around here that made you, or a lot of other people, sad?" The old farmer dropped his head as if he were ashamed, and after a few seconds looked up timidly at the young man and said, "I got lost once." An engineer is giving a lecture at the local college. The lecture hall is completely full, with a line out the door of people trying to get in. From the outside of the building, the audience could be heard erupting with laughter, applause, oohs and ahs, and gasps of surprise. A man walking by sees the line out the door and hears the commotion coming from the lecture hall and decides to see what is going on. He gets as close as he can to the front and asks one of the students trying to get in what the lecture is supposed to be about. Well, an engineer is in there giving a speech entitled "The Mechanical Properties and Shear Strength Analysis of Joints Fastened by Means of Metallic Slugs Compressed by Pneumatic Tools." The student replied. The man's mouth dropped open in disbelief. "This whole crowd and all that noise for something that sounds like a snooze fest?" he asked. The student replied, "Oh, don't let the name fool you. When it comes right down to it, it is simply riveting." Four guys are out playing golf when they come to a short par 3 hole. Two of them hit their tee shots onto the green, but the other two slice their tee shots way out into the woods. The two guys on the green sink their putts and then they wait for their friends. And wait, and wait. Finally, one of them says, "I'm going to walk back down the fairway and see what's keeping them." So he walks back down the fairway and off into the woods, and then he finds his friends. But they both have their clothes off, and one of them has the other one bent over a log and is humping him. He's shocked and yells out, "Fred, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Both guys are startled, and the one on top points at the other one and says, he had a heart attack." Their friend says, "A heart attack? Then why didn't you give him mouth to mouth?" And Fred says, "I did. How do you think all this got started?" An extremely wealthy investor and his wife of 25 years were having dinner at a 5-star restaurant when an absolutely stunning young woman came over to their table, gave the husband a big wet kiss, and in a breathy voice she said, "I'll see you later tonight," ending with a wink just before turning and slinking away. The wife glared at her husband and asked, "Who was that?" "Oh," replied the husband, matter-of-factly, "she is my mistress." "Well, that's the last straw," the wife announced furiously. "I've had quite enough. I want a divorce," she demanded. "I can understand that," replied her suddenly sympathetic husband. "But remember, you signed a rock-solid prenup, and if we get divorced, it'll mean no more shopping trips to Paris, no more wintering in Barbados, no more summers in Tuscany, no more expensive cars in the garage, and no more yacht club. But the decision is yours." Just then, a mutual friend entered the restaurant with a gorgeous young woman on his arm. "Who's that woman with Jim?" the wife asked curiously. "That's his mistress," the husband replied. Still trying to make sense of her own husband's indiscretion, she thought for a moment, and then, in a haughty voice, she said, "Well, ours is much prettier." A man and woman had been married for more than 60 years. They had shared everything. They had talked about everything. They had kept no secrets from each other, except that the little old woman had a shoebox in the top of her closet that she had cautioned her husband never to open or ask her about. For all of these years, he had never thought about the box, but one day, the little old woman got very sick, and the doctor said she would not recover. In trying to sort out their affairs, the little old man took down the shoebox and took it to his wife's bedside. She agreed that it was time that he should know what was in the box. When he opened it, he found 2 crocheted dolls and a stack of money totaling $95,000. He asked her about the contents.
"When we were to be married," she said, "my grandmother told me the secret of a happy marriage was to never argue. She told me that if I ever got angry with you, I should just keep quiet and crochet a doll." The little old man was so moved he had to fight back tears. Only 2 precious dolls were in the box. She had only been angry with him 2 times in all those years of living and loving. He almost burst with happiness. "Honey," he said, "that explains the doll. But what about all of this money? Where did it come from?" "Oh," she said, "that's the money I made from selling the dolls."
A retired couple sitting at home was reliving their 50 years of marriage together. The wife finally had gotten the courage to ask, "What's the cigar box under the bed you told me to never open?" The husband sat a moment and then got up, abruptly leaving the room. When he returned, he had the cigar box. He sat down and opened it. Inside, there were 3 $50 bills. "I wasn't always the man I am today. I haven't always been faithful. Times were tough when we were younger, and it caused us to struggle even more. But every time I was unfaithful, I put $50 in this box to remind myself how much I was hurting us." The wife sat silent a few minutes. She had tears in her eyes when she stood up and went outside. As she drove away, her husband feared he may have hurt her too badly for their marriage to survive. To his surprise, she returned after a while. She had a jar with $50.05 in it. She explained that she also had been unfaithful and made the gentleman leave something behind so she too would have a reminder. The husband seemed saddened and relieved, but confused all at the same time. The wife asked for his reaction. "I don't understand. Who's the a-hole that left 5 cents? "What do you mean? They all left 5 cents. A young couple dies on their way to their wedding. On their way to get married, a young Catholic couple was involved in a fatal car accident. The couple found themselves sitting outside the pearly gates, waiting for St. Peter to process them into heaven. While waiting, they began to wonder, could they possibly get married in heaven? When St. Peter arrived, they asked him if they could get married in heaven. St. Peter said, "I don't know. This is the first time anyone has asked. Let me go find out," and he left. The couple sat and waited for an answer for a couple of months. While they waited, they discussed the pros and cons. If they were allowed to get married in heaven, should they get married? What with the eternal aspect of it all? What if it doesn't work? Are we stuck in heaven together forever? Another month passed, and St. Peter finally returned, looking somewhat bedraggled. "Yes," he informed the couple, "you can get married in heaven." "Great," said the couple, "but we were just wondering, what if things don't work out? Could we also get a divorce in heaven?" St. Peter, red-faced with anger, slammed his clipboard on the ground. "What's wrong?" asked the frightened couple. "Oh, come on," St. Peter shouted. "It took me 3 months to find a priest up here. Do you have any idea how long it'll take to find a lawyer?" A couple was celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary when the wife claimed that she and her husband hadn't argued since their wedding night. After being asked about how they did it, the wife explains that after their wedding ceremony, they went and took a little honeymoon in a horse and buggy. The horse walked 10 miles and stopped, refusing to go further. "That's 1," said the wife. The horse looked back, walked another 5 miles and stopped, refusing to go further. "That's 2," said the wife. The horse looked back, walked another 5 miles and stopped, refusing to go further. "All right, that's 3," said the wife angrily. She stepped out of their buggy, grabbed a shotgun, and shot the horse. "Hold on," the husband said. "What do you think you are doing? We're 20 miles from home with no way back, and that was a vicious act of animal cruelty." The wife looked at her new husband and said, "That's 1." A woman comes home early and finds her husband in bed with a girl. She is furious and threatens to kill them both. The husband says, "Believe me, darling, this is just a misunderstanding. I was driving home and saw this young lady trying to catch a ride, so I decided to give her a lift. I ask her where she needs to go, and she tells me she wants to visit some relatives but isn't sure about their address. So I took her home so she could check our phone book.
Once there, I saw her dress was pretty ragged, so I decided to give her your old dress. Nearly 2 years that it's been hanging in the closet and you never wore it. Then I saw her shoes are also about to fall apart, so I gave her your old shoes, which have been doing nothing but collecting dust for 3 years. Of course, she said thanks and then asked, "Excuse me, sir, but is there anything else in this house your wife never uses?"
A very attractive nurse was working a hectic schedule of double shifts all week, so she didn't really have time to do laundry. She had no clean underwear, so she just figured she'd throw on some scrubs and head to work. Her shift that day was a nightmare. She lost 3 elderly patients while she was in the room cleaning. She took a short break to mourn, then headed to care for another, slightly younger patient. As she was walking to his room, she pleaded to God, "Please don't take this one too." She walked into the room and noticed that one of his socks was on the floor. She bent down to pick it up, and all of a sudden, she heard the heart monitor beep loudly and freaked. She looked at him and said, "Are you okay?" He said, "Yes, I'm fine, but I think you should know your scrubs have a hole in them." A priest, a lawyer, and an accountant were all at the bedside of a very ill man. The man said to them, "Gentlemen, I'm dying. Before I go, however, I want to ask you one final favor. My family is rotten, and I don't want to give any of them an inheritance. I would like to be buried with the remainder of my money." He then hands the priest, the lawyer, and the accountant 3 envelopes that contain $100,000 each. "While my coffin is being lowered into the earth, please throw each of the envelopes in. Don't tell anyone what's inside the envelopes." So the 3 men leave. Sure enough, 1 week later, the man dies. During the funeral, the 3 men toss the envelopes into the grave whilst the coffin is being lowered. After the funeral, the 3 men go to a cafe to discuss the life of the old man. The priest says, "I have a confession. I took $10,000 from my envelope, but I used it to fix up the children's home. The old man was always very generous and loved the children. I'm sure he wouldn't mind seeing where his money went." The lawyer pipes in, "Well, I also have a confession. I took $30,000 as payment of a personal loan he borrowed from me years ago." The accountant, looking rather shocked, says, "I cannot believe you two. I wrote a personal check that covered the whole thing." John was attending his buddy's wedding, and everything was normal. The ceremony was at a beautiful church in the countryside. The officiant gave an insightful speech on the meaning of marriage, and the bride and groom were beaming throughout the whole thing. John couldn't have been happier for his friend. After exchanging vows, the bride and groom announced that they needed some time before joining the rest of the party at the reception. John didn't really know anyone else attending, so he went on a walk around the grounds by himself. He was enjoying the countryside and the evening summer breeze when he came across an odd scene behind the church. The bride and groom had set up an impromptu archery range, and the bride was standing there, bow and arrow in hand, shooting arrow after arrow at the target set up downrange. However, every arrow went wildly off course. To complete the scene, after every shot, the groom was standing next to his bride with a spray bottle, spraying her with water each time. Thoroughly shaken, John went back in the church looking for someone to confide in. He went up to the officiant, who was still packing up from the ceremony. John said, "Did you know that the groom is out back spraying the bride with water while she's horrible at archery?" The officiant just stared blankly at John, so he repeated himself. The officiant suddenly seemed to realize. The officiant said, Sorry, I didn't know what you were talking about. You see, I pronounce them Mr. and Mrs. A man, while playing on the front nine of a complicated golf course, became confused as to where he was on the course. Looking around, he saw a lady playing ahead of him. He walked up to her, explained his confusion, and asked her if she knew what hole he was playing. She replied, "I'm on the 7th hole, and you are a hole behind me, so you must be on the 6th hole." He thanked her and went back to his golf. On the back nine, the same thing happened, and he approached her again with the same request. She said, "I'm on the 14th hole.
You are a hole behind me, so you must be on the 13th hole." Once again, he thanked her and returned to his play. He finished his round and went to the clubhouse, where he saw the same lady sitting at the end of the bar. He asked the bartender if he knew the lady. The bartender said that she was a saleswoman and played the course often. He approached her and said, "Let me buy you a drink in appreciation for your help. I understand that you are in the sales profession. I'm in sales too. What do you sell?" She replied, "If you tell you, you'll laugh." "No, I won't." "Well, if you must know," she answered, "I work for Tampax." With that, he laughed so hard he almost lost his breath. She said, "See, I knew you would laugh." "That's not what I'm laughing at," he replied. "I'm a salesman for Preparation H, so I'm still a hole behind you." One Sunday morning, the Pope wakes up and heads to the bathroom. To his surprise, he notices he's dealing with some rather impressive morning wood. Realizing he can't possibly lead the Sunday service in his current state, he decides to take a little detour. Later that day, after delivering a powerful sermon, he returns home to find a note pinned to his door. It reads, "I saw what you did, and I've got pictures. Pay me $25,000 or I'll expose you." After much contemplation, the Pope reluctantly decides to pay the extortionist. The Pope meets the man, hands him the money, and in exchange, the man gives him everything: pictures, film, negatives, and even the camera. He burns everything, keeping only the camera as a reminder of his lapse in judgment. As he walks through the Vatican, the Pope is approached by a tourist who notices the camera around his neck. "Excuse me, Your Holiness," the tourist says. "That's an incredible camera you have there. If you don't mind me asking, how much did it cost?" The Pope sighs and replies, "It cost me $25,000. The tourist raises an eyebrow and says, "$25,000? Well, I guess that's what happens when someone really knows how to take advantage of a situation."
A young husband comes home one night and his wife throws her arms around his neck. "Darling, I have great news. I'm a month overdue. I think we're going to have a baby. The doctor gave me a test today, but until we find out for sure, we can't tell anybody." The next day, a guy from the electric company rings the doorbell because the young couple hasn't paid their last bill. "Are you Mrs. Smith? You're a month overdue, you know." "How do you know?" stammers the young woman. "Well, ma'am, it's in our files," says the man from the electric company. "What are you saying? It's in your files?" "Absolutely." "Well, let me talk to my husband about this tonight." That night, she tells her husband about the visit, and he, mad as a bull, rushes to the electric company offices the first thing the next morning. "What's going on here? You have it on file that my wife is a month overdue? What business is that of yours?" the husband shouts. "Just calm down," says the clerk. "It's nothing serious. All you have to do is pay us." "Pay you? And if I refuse?" "Well, in that case, sir, we'd have no option but to cut yours off." "And what would my wife do then?" aspers the husband. "I don't know. I guess she'd have to use a candle." Biker John and Joe, two unemployed guys, are talking. Biker John says, "I'm gonna become a lion tamer." Joe replies, "That's crazy. You don't know anything about lion taming." "Yes, I do," exclaimed Biker John. "Well, okay, answer me this. When one of those lions comes at you all roaring and biting, what are you gonna do?" asked Joe. Biker John answers, "Well, then I'd take that big chair they all carry, and I'll stick it in his face until he backs down." "Well, what if the lion takes that big paw and hooks the chair with those big claws and throws that chair out of the cage? What do you do then?" counters Joe. "Well, then I'd take that whip they all carry, and I whip him until he backs down," says Biker John. Again, Joe questions, "Well, what if that whip bites with his big teeth and bites it in two? What are you gonna do then?" "Well, then I'll take that gun they all carry and shoot him," said Biker John. "Well, what if that gun doesn't work? What will you do then?" Joe adds. "Well, then I'll pick up some of the shit that's on the bottom of the cage, and I throw it in his eyes and run out of the cage." Joe asks, "Well, if there isn't any shit on the bottom of the cage, what are you gonna do then, huh?"
Biker John smiles and says, well, that's dumb, because if that lion comes at me and he throws the chair out of the cage and he bites the whip in two and my gun doesn't work, there's gonna be some shit on the bottom of that cage. You could damn well bet on that.
Well, in China, a man is very sexually promiscuous and does not use a condom all the time he is there. A week after arriving back home in Sydney, he wakes one morning to find his tool covered with bright green and purple spots. Horrified, he immediately goes to see a doctor. The doctor, never having seen anything like this before, orders some tests and tells the man to return in 2 days for the results. The man returns a couple of days later and the doctor says, "I've got bad news for you. You've contracted Mongolian VD. It's very rare and almost unheard of here. We know very little about it." The man looks a little perplexed and says, "Well, give me a shot or something and fix me up, doc." The doctor answers, "I'm sorry, there's no known cure. We're going to have to amputate your tool." The man screams in horror, "Absolutely not. I want a second opinion." The doctor replies, "Well, it's your choice. Go ahead if you want, but surgery is your only option." The next day, the man seeks out a Chinese doctor, figuring that he'll know more about the disease. The Chinese doctor examines his tool and proclaims, yes, Mongolian VD, a very rare disease." The guy says to the doctor, yeah, I already know that, but what can we do? My doctor wants to cut off my tool." The Chinese doctor shakes his head and laughs. "Stupid Australian doctor, always wanting to operate, make more money that way. No need to amputate." "Oh, thank God," the man exclaims. "Yes," says the Chinese doctor. "Wait 2 weeks, fall off by itself." 4 friends who hadn't seen each other in 30 years are reunited at a party. After several drinks, one of the men had to use the restroom. Those who remained talked about their kids. The first guy said, "My son is my pride and joy. He started working at a successful company at the bottom of the barrel. He studied economics and business administration and soon began to climb the corporate ladder, and now he's the president of the company. He became so rich that he gave his best friend a top-of-the-line Mercedes for his birthday." The second guy said, "Darn, that's terrific. My son is also my pride and joy. He started working for a big airline, then went to flight school to become a pilot. Eventually, he became a partner in the company, where he owns the majority of its assets. He's so rich that he gave his best friend a brand new jet for his birthday." The third man said, "Well, that's terrific. My son studied at the best universities and became an engineer. Then he started his own construction company and now is a multi-millionaire. He also gave away something very nice and expensive for his best friend for his birthday, a 30,000 square foot mansion." The 3 friends congratulated each other just as the fourth returned from the restroom and asked, "What are all the congratulations for?" One of the 3 said, "We were talking about the pride we feel for the successes of our sons. What about your son?" The fourth man replied, "My son is gay and makes a living dancing as a stripper at a nightclub." The 3 friends said, "What a shame. What a disappointment." The fourth man replied, "No, I'm not ashamed. Why should I be? He's my son, and I love him very much. Besides, he hasn't done too badly either. His birthday was 2 weeks ago, and he received a beautiful 30,000 square foot mansion, a brand new jet, and a top-of-the-line Mercedes from his 3 boyfriends." Josh was excited. As his first official duty as a parish priest, fresh out of school, he got to officiate his first funeral for a homeless man with no friends or family. The young priest vowed to give him the most loving send-off, the love he probably missed in this life. The funeral was to be held at a new cemetery across town, and this man was the first to be laid to rest there. New to the area, Father Josh arrived late but noticed a few workers gathering around the grave opening. The young and enthusiastic priest poured out his heart and soul as he gave his sermon and recited the prayers. His voice was so evocative and powerful that he brought the cemetery workers to tears.
When the service was over, the priest thanked the workers for listening and walked to his car. As he opened the door, Josh heard one worker say to the other, "I've never seen anything like that before, and I've been putting in septic systems for over 20 years."